Hello, and welcome to the Happy Spot interview with Dr. Clif P. Lewis. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the human score, redefining human centricity in organizations. Welcome, Dr. Cliff.
Hi, Clementina. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and you're joining us all the way from Cape Town, South Africa. So it is
I am.
near, nearly midnight there, or have we just reached
We're
midnight?
just 1 minute past midnight. Yeah.
Well, then, good morning, sir.
Thank you.
How are you?
Thank
How
you.
are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I thought I was going to be a bit more tired, but I'm very excited to talk about the human score. So I'm energized and happy to chat with you.
Great. I'm excited too. So let's jump right in then. So for those who don't know anything about it, in your own words, tell us who you are and how you arrived at the intersection of psychology, leadership, and human systems.
Oh, wow. How long do I have?
We have an hour.
Well, all right. So let me see if I can do the abridged version. So I'm a psychologist by training. By trade. But when I started doing research, so different countries have different approaches and requirements. In South Africa, if you want to be a psychologist, you have to have a master's degree. I know in the United States, you have to have a PsyD. It's a little bit different here. So we start or you sort of get a taste for research when you do your master's. Um, and I kind of realized that I don't want to work with individual people necessarily. I'm more interested in people as groups and how people operate within systems and how systems can empower people or oppress people. Um, a lot of those themes came through in my master's research, my doctoral research. I didn't have quite the linear career path that my peers and my colleagues typically have, where you go to university, you do your master's, you register, you practice. I didn't do that, and I suppose if you want to answer the question as to why I arrived at that, I don't know. I suppose I get bored easily. So I had a very non-traditional career trajectory. I was very fortunate to have worked all over the world, present papers all over the world, and just interacting with so many different people and organizations. I realized that I don't just want to do psychology, I want to do so many other things. And I think that the human score is a good representation of that intersection. Um, really looking at systems in organizations that, to be honest, aren't doing so well by people.
Mm,
And there's a lot of leaders out there who uphold those systems. But in my own work, as I mentioned, I do a whole bunch of different stuff. One of the things that I do is executive coaching, and I meet a lot of leaders who actually do want to make their organizations more human centric, but they don't know how. And working with the amazing organization, the Octopus Movement, we collaborated and we arrived at the human score. I know that wasn't your question. Your question was about how I
yeah,
arrived at the
yeah.
intersection,
And
but
I'm
I
gonna.
suppose they
It's
all bleed into each other.
I got you. I got you. I know for nonlinear thinkers, which joins us at the Octopus over at the Octopus Movement, um, it can be it can be hard to answer a question with a in a box, right? So I got
Right.
so much. So I was listening for pieces that I'm going to put together and say back to you, and then ask you if you would to just drill down a little deeper,
Oh,
and I'll
sure.
guide you with the question that I really want to know. So what I heard from you is that you prefer groups of people over the study of one person. Right? You said you like to do a lot of different things. So putting
Yeah.
yourself, solely in that psychology box, didn't feel so good. So, the expansive quality um, of combining psychology, leadership, and human systems is what really does it for you. So I
Yeah.
really get that. But as a memoirist and a writing coach, I myself wondered, okay, but what really makes you the perfect person to do that? Is there a more personal answer? And if there's not, that's okay. Just my
100%.
own curiosity gets the better of me. I have found in, talking to so many people that there's always a deeply personal reason that they do what they do.
Oh, 100%. Cannot agree more. So you mentioned that I'm calling you, or we're speaking. Well, I'm in Cape Town, and you're in the United States. So I am a South African. I know I sound a bit weird, but that's just because I've been to so many places. The
Not for
ac
me.
the accents the accent's a bit whack, but so um. I'm a South African. I'm a white South African. I'm a middle class white South African, and I'm a man. So as I I grew up in a very conservative town, very much an insular kind of bubble. And I mean, I was 18 years old, and I still thought most South Africans were white and Afrikaans. No, not 1816. It's a little bit less bad, but it's pretty much still bad. If you know anything about South Africa, you know that that's definitely not the case. I think white people are about like 7% of the population. So I really grew up in a bubble. And as I were afforded opportunities to step out of that bubble, so going to university, number one, leaving the town, I'm seeing people who look different from me, who live differently from me, who experience life in different ways, and then going overseas, studying overseas, working overseas. Like, it feels like with each um passing day, I become more and more acutely aware of, I don't want to bring this interview to to a very down level, but I get very aware of all the pain um that I have been spared from, that I have
Mm,
had the fortune and the privilege to not have to experience. Um, and I really, without sounding too much of a cliche, I really want to do my part to alleviate that pain and suffering in whichever way or form it happens. And as a psychologist, you can choose to work with individuals and help them work with their own individual issues and struggles and help them through that. Or you could choose the route that I chose and work at a more systemic or group level, which I think my temperament, I've come to learn over the years that I get very passionate about things, and that's not always a very good temperament when you're working in the therapeutic. Not that I do therapy, I don't do that types of work anyway, but um,
yeah, it
that's pretty
totally
much, yeah,
perfect. And that's the
that's where I'm coming
perfect.
from.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that. So this is the perfect segue into my next question, which is you've been called a corporate doula.
Yes.
And it's such a powerful metaphor. How did that come about? What does it really mean? What does it mean to you? Um,
Yeah, so I have to say I didn't come up with that term. I think it's a amazing way of looking at transformation in organizations. I mean, we've been talking about organizational transformation for decades.
sure.
Many years ago, it was along the lines of globalization, and then it was making organizations more inclusive. More recently, transformation from a technological perspective. And I think one of the big issues, as I've mentioned, with each passing day, I realize more and more about the pain that's in the world. I also realize that some of that pain, well, a lot of that pain, comes from how our industries are set up. And one of the big issues is corporate entities don't want to die. And everything organic and everything real and everything organic or real or natural dies. We get an opportunity to live, and then it's someone else's turn or something else's turn. A tree grows out of our remains, and then it's the tree's turn. And the corporate doula to me speaks to that birth and death with dignity. And I think corporate entities have a lot to learn from that sort of metaphor and that way of looking at it. You don't constantly have to grow and get more and have a bigger margin. And because that's when an organization turns cancerous, in my opinion. But we can
Mm,
grow, we can create new opportunities, we can create new organizations, and then the organization needs to die at some point. And
mm,
I think reframing that whole process, and having people assist with that process and framing that assistance as a doula makes it more natural. It makes it more, I think, organic. That's my view of it. That's my understanding of it. But my business partners at the Happy Spot, or my colleagues at the Happy Spot, I have to give them the credit. That's their conceptualization. But it so resonates with me and my perspective of business and industry as well, and the problems that I see.
wonderful, wonderful. So, I guess before I ask you to tell me more about the human score, I'd like you to, just for our audience who might, they
Hmm.
may have heard the term, but they're not quite sure. What does it mean to be human centric? What does human centricity mean now? And why is it such a big conversation for companies right now?
Oh, that's such a good question. Right. So, in essence, human centricity is exactly what it says. Humans are at the center. And I hear a lot of anti-capitalist critiques that says that capital used to be in service of people or in service of society. Uh, that has changed since like the 70s. I'm not an economist, but that was kind of when at least in the West, the um, the focus shifted, and we started working for capital. And you're going to have to remind me, what was your question again? Because I know that I was working towards a
No,
point.
I'm happy to. I'm sure the audience will appreciate that as well.
I was
What
working
is
towards
human,
a point.
right? So
Oh,
what
human
is human
centricity.
centricity, right? What
Yes.
is it?
So,
I mean, you
yes.
said
So
briefly
people are
define
at
it,
the center.
right?
Yes. And I see a lot of organizations try to be human centric by having all kinds of perks and things that they just slap on, but people aren't really at the center.
Mm,
And I think we need to go to break, but
yes.
that's essentially what human centricity is people being at the center. Now, what exactly that means is a bit more nuanced, but
So let's
until we
talk
come
about,
back,
when we
yeah,
come back, let's talk about what it looks, some examples of what it looks like when humans are at the center. Thank you
right.
so much.
Are you a conscious co creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
All right, so we're back with Dr. Clif talking to us tonight about the human score, human centricity, and all kinds of great things. Thanks to our friends at the Happy Spot, whose mission is always to educate, inspire, and uplift, and create better business through the power of happiness. So speaking of better business through the power of happiness, Dr. Clif, what would a human-centric focus in business look like? What are some examples of it?
Right. So, as I mentioned just before the break, human centricity is people at the center. Now, that might seem, well, yeah, we consider people in everything that we do, but in fact, it is extremely hard being human-centric in our current global industry setup, the way that industries are set up, because what is required of organizations to survive in most cases is not putting people at the center, just considering people on the periphery as a means to an end. And so what an organization looks like that is people-centric. So my work currently with the Happy Spot and the Human Score focuses specifically on employees, but human centricity extends to all human stakeholders in business. So it includes customers, it includes the communities they serve, the businesses serve, its suppliers, that whole, everyone that's involved. And when your organization is human-centric, it means whenever there is a big decision that needs to be made, the question has to be answered. How is this affecting the humans? How is this affecting my people? And in our case specifically, we look at how that affects our employees.
Great. So you often say that metrics like turnover and absenteeism, those are symptoms, not causes.
Yep.
What are organizations missing when they chase performance metrics?
Many things.
I mean, it sounded like it was going to be an easy answer.
Yeah. No, many things. But one of those things is an opportunity for meaning. I'm not one for romanticizing the past at all, but if you go back maybe just like pre industrial revolution, and you look at various trades that people had and professions that people had that were actually a way for people to create meaning in their life, a way to serve the community. As humans, our natural tendency is towards the collective. As humans, we're hardwired as a survival mechanism to work together. We didn't become the apex predator on the planet because we're the smartest or the strongest. It's because of our ability to work as a collective. But the way in which we work has completely divorced us from our labor and from the work that we do. We're in most people's cases, I mean, I'm very fortunate because I can see the direct impact of my work, but in most people's cases, they don't really see the impact of their work. They just feel like, because most of the time they are just a cog in a bigger machine. And it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult to create meaning from that. So you're essentially living a meaningless life.
That is so fascinating. I'm a huge fan of Dr. Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And, again, as a book coach and a co-creator, all the time I see people writing memoir, personal story, trying to make meaning. It's a compulsion of ours as human beings to make meaning, right? And it's such an important part of our overall health. That wow, I never put it together looked at, what's the role of meaning in a corporate environment. I never thought about it the way until you just said it that way. So that's wow. So that's definitely something they're missing, right? Is how do
and there's so many challenges to doing that, to be able to do that.
For who? Challenges for who to do what?
for us as humans who work, to be able to create meaning from that work, and to create meaning from our work, and to create meaning from organizational life, because of how work is structured, how organizations are
Right.
structured.
Right. Right. But you were saying once upon a time, it wasn't that hard. It was just something people did. Right.
Yes, before we had, the current corporate enterprise that we see today. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, it's probably no surprise to you that we're living through what some call a global mental health crisis.
Oh
And
yeah.
47.6 billion is lost annually to missed work just in the US.
Mhm.
Um, how much of that do you think is due to, or what's your picture of how, what's the role of mental health or wellness in that picture?
See, this is now when I start turning into a hippie commie liberal. because
Yay!
because because often when we have discussions about things like mental well-being in business, or inclusion in business, or the more fluffy things in business, I don't personally think they're fluffy, but a lot
Right.
of people would categorize them as such. And so there's often two schools of thought. The one is the business case, and the one is the social justice case. So from a business case, it would be like, how much more money can I make if my people are better equipped to handle mental well-being challenges? And the social justice case is, well, what's the right thing to do? Now, my stance is always like, all right, so if I cannot prove somehow empirically that there's a direct impact of mental health on, business outcomes like, say, profit or market share or growth or whatever, then am I not going to care about mental health? And the answer to that is kind of yeah, because until something affects something like you mentioned, turnover, absenteeism due to mental health, organizations kind of go, I'll worry about it when it becomes a problem. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I think it's very important because humans aren't machines, and it is the right thing to do. But if you're a business case school of thought person, then it's just good business. It's just good business. I mean, if you want people to do proper work, you can't expect them to do the work while ill. It makes no sense.
Right, right, right. Um, so in your experience, how well do companies really understand, you know, the effects of burnout? And, I mean, I guess they recognize for sure that that their profit margins are shrinking, or that there are these losses, but
Yeah.
are they able, how much denial is there, I guess, is another way
Let me tell
to.
you what, that is a fascinating question. I promise you, listen. So I cannot disclose who, because this is a large organization and I don't want to get sued. But I was doing, as part of I don't want to give too much away in case someone gets a hold of my resume. But anyway, I was doing work for this big organization, right? And one of the things that I worked on, this was like just as remote work and hybrid work started getting sort of traction post that hard lockdown in 2020.
Hmm. Hmm.
Organizations were like, "Do you know what? This is actually cool. Like, let's do this." Um, I was part of a team that put together a fatigue policy. So this isn't even a wellness policy. This is a very narrow, specific fatigue policy, because people, I mean, everyone has heard the story. People started working remote and they started burning out, right? I'm actually currently working on a research paper. The journal sent it back. We had to make edits, which we're not feeling very good about. But so
No one
we're
feels
doing
good
research
about
on
it.
burnout. Burnout. Yeah, yeah.
From me.
I hate it when the publishers do that, right? And I promise you, there was a policy. There was a fatigue policy. And I was a consultant, so I was working after hours because I was billing by the hour. But there were salaried employees who were time and time again, I would log onto my computer and I would see the green dot on their team's name. And I would message them kind of tongue in cheek and say, should I send you the link to the fatigue policy? And they'd be like, oh no, I just need to do some stuff. And this wasn't isolated cases. These were like, this was a trend. And so companies know this. They put in a fatigue policy or a wellness policy or something more general. And then they kind of just expect things to continue as they are because people aren't at the center. Other things are at the center, like efficiency, productivity. Microsoft does a workplace index. I forget the actual name, but they do an annual work index. I forget the actual name. But in 2022's one, there was a fascinating statistic on hybrid and remote work where something like 80% of employees feel that they are productive when they work remote or hybrid, but a fraction of executives or people in leadership roles felt that their people like were productive working remotely. So there's such a disconnect in those who make decisions. And that's why I kind of keep going back to people have to be at the center of decisions.
So let's move on to what we really want to talk about, the really exciting stuff. So tell us about the human score and how what is it, what makes it different from traditional employee engagement surveys, and I think most importantly, how is it going to help with this problem? How is it going to help to bring humans to the center?
Right. So it is a tool for people in decision-making roles who have already made the decision that they want to be more human-centric, whether that is for the business case or the social justice case. That's between them and their mother. But it is something that you can hold on to because the notion of human centricity is so nebulous. It's easy to say it's people at the center, but what does that really mean in practice?
Mm-hmm.
That can mean so many different things in different companies, in different countries, in different industries. So the human score is a tool for that. And so what it does is it's kind of like a pyramid or an iceberg, whatever metaphor you want to choose. So at the very top, it gives you an overall score of like you're doing well or not doing so well. And then it breaks that score down into various different dimensions to tell you why are you doing so well or not so well, and where in these areas you're doing well or not so well. And we also give recommendations based on the actual scores.
Great. I think we're going to go to break right now. So when we come back, we will talk about those recommendations.
I can blab more about my methodology and my analytics.
I can't wait.
Cool.
I can't wait.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Hi, I'm Linda Marcanico. The A Train to Sedona is a memoir about my journey to love and compassion. It's also the name of my new broadcast on Wednesdays at 12 noon. When we are spiritual, we embrace possibilities and ideas, which strengthen our mind, body, spirit, health, and wisdom. On the A Train to Sedona broadcast, I plan to interview guests who embrace these expansive practices. Join us on Wednesdays at 12 noon on Talk Radio New York City.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hello, hello. I'm so happy to be back with Dr. Clif, all the way from South Africa, joining us tonight to talk about the human score. And we were up to the really exciting part where you were going to kind of get into the nitty gritty of, kind of telling us about it. How does it work? What does it measure? What's your favorite? I feel like asking you, what's your favorite question? I took it last night and I had some fun with it. I definitely had some favorite questions.
Sure. I think you also mentioned how it's different from engagement surveys. That's such a good question, because I think a lot of the time when organizations want to do work on being more human-centric or being more people-focused or being more sensitive to how people experience organizational life, engagement is usually a go-to. And so I'm not hating on engagement surveys or any kind of work in that field. I think it's great. Just think it's a bit limited. And it's not, it's not, some are, but it's not as systemically focused.
Right.
Which the human score is. So should I maybe go into a little bit more detail in the various dimensions that it measures?
I would love that.
Cool. So the first breakdown, so you've got your high level score. That's we actually use the ABC. There's actually a few pluses in there as well. The goal is to have an A plus, but it's all about putting in work. So we don't want perfection. We want to put in the work to make an organization, because it's always a work in progress. It's a very dynamic experience. So you've got your score. So you've got an A, a B, a C, and then that's divided up into 5 dimensions. And those 5 dimensions are work design, organizational structure, organizational culture, fairness, and decision-making. So how did I arrive at all of that? I arrived at it by reading many, many, many articles and books and distilling all these various, because there's lots of different
approaches,
ideas and approaches on how to achieve this exactly. And so I arrived at those from reading the literature. And so just briefly, the assumption with the first one, so work design is, if I can take the extreme example of like working on a supply chain, you're not being very human-centric if people literally sit and do the same little thing for 8 or, God forbid, 12, 14 hours a day. That's not very human-centric. People want variety. People want meaning, like we've just discussed, and it's very hard to gain meaning from that type of work design. So how do we design work? There's a lot of new approaches, like things like the skills-based organization instead of the job-based organization, where people are saying, specialists are saying, jobs are too rigid and it's hard to get meaning from them because it's a bunch of routinized stuff. Let's go towards a different angle. So that's one approach. Then organizational design. How do people interact? The classic is the hierarchy. You've got your team and then your boss and then their boss's boss. And that's also not very conducive to human centricity. Human centricity is more enabled by things like social networks. So organizations that's designed around organizational networks and how it facilitates natural human engagement. What was the next one? Organizational culture. I think that's what people generally know is the norms and the practices of the organization, and they can be very destructive or they can empower and enable people. Fairness is all around how people are treated, how people are included or excluded, marginalized. Of course, the argument there is a human-centric organization is inclusive and fair and non-biased. And then the last one is decision-making. How do we make decisions? Who is included in the decision-making process? Whose voices are heard? So those are the five dimensions. And then they're broken up even more. So you can choose at which level of granularity you want to engage with. Also, maybe important to note is it is an organizational measure. So the human score is something that tells us something about the organization as an entity and as a structure. And we collect information from the workers, from the employees, to get the data to be able to say what we're saying about the organization.
Yeah, that's great. And then you've also mentioned that this could lead to, the next step, which would be organizations being able to socially flag their progress.
Yeah.
Why is that public signaling so important today?
I think, well, I think there's a lot of evidence that we're going through a revolution. People are asking the questions like, what am I doing with my life? We're seeing more and more people being critical about the role of work in their lives. We're seeing an unprecedented number of people deciding to quit their jobs and take the plunge and become entrepreneurs, going into different career paths that they maybe previously wouldn't have done. And so if then from a business case perspective, if organizations want to remain competitive and they want to attract talent and they want to retain talent, again, with the turnover and the absenteeism, they're going to have to communicate in some way that working for them is not going to be some dark, sucking hole of despair, you know? So, that's the one side. And then the other side is, again, with this movement of anti-work. I mean, anti-work is an actual field in the academic literature that I used for the human score. It's an actual thing. It's not just a headline in a newspaper. People are over it.
How long has it
And
been how long has it been a thing? Is it a new thing or historically?
it's always, I mean, people have been unhappy and this classical thing of like, oh, I hate my job, I hate my boss. But it's really in my opinion and from what I've seen gone from just narratives to actual action, to like, I hate my job, so I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna go live with my parents because
Right. And I mean, I just
and
mean,
COVID.
if you knew, and I definitely do not expect you to know this off the top of your head, but I'd be curious to know when the term sort of anti-work started being a thing
Oh.
in the literature and that kind of thing.
Well, I can tell you authors to look for is Alliger,
Okay.
Alliger. Um, it's fairly recent. It's not very
Okay.
old.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
transition from narrative to action it was triggered by the pandemic.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah.
So can you tell us a story? And again, you don't need to require names, but this is sort of I hope maybe it's a happy story, where using the human score exposed something unexpected in an organization.
I wish I had a really nice story for you, but I
I
don't
do too.
because
No, come
yes,
on.
because we're still building a large enough data set to be able to tell these types of stories. I don't have a sufficient, and now I'm putting on my academic hat, I don't have a sufficient amount of data to be able to tell that
Fair
story
enough.
yet. But watch
Fair
the
enough.
space.
But yeah, let's watch it. I bet within a year you'll have a story to tell. And
Hope so.
I can't wait. I can't wait for that. It's going to be great. Um, So what's your big hope? What's your grand, I know everyone that makes something great. And as I shared with listeners, I took the human score last night. I thought it was, it's just a wonderful accomplishment that really not only, a lot, it gets, I had this in my own family recently. I learned from one of my oldest sons from a conversation with him that, things weren't how I thought they were. Right.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I have a totally different perception of this thing that we're talking about. How interesting. Right. And I thought I knew his perception. Right. And so I was like, and toward the end of the conversation, I was like, thank you so much for sharing this with me. I really care about this. And he's like, I said, that's why I asked you X and Y and Z. And he was like, well, you need to ask better questions. It's like, yes, I do. And yeah, apparently I do. So as I took the human score, I was really struck by the kinds of, it almost to me in and of itself created a little culture that felt safe and caring. And, like it was positing the right kinds of questions and concerns. And so, what is your vision? I mean, what is your hope for this? What's the big thinking that you're hoping?
So first, I want to say thank you for being so kind in sharing your experience about taking the survey. I suppose my hope would be for lots of organizations to use it and it actually being a useful tool that we can use to be critical of just accepting ways of doing things. Excuse me. But actually, now that I think about it, what I really want, especially in the short term, is people to tell me why it's not doing that. And that might sound like a weird thing to say, but we've piloted it and we've distributed it amongst some of our associates and our partners. And I've gotten so much good feedback of people saying, "Ugh, this doesn't work," or this thing that I don't think you're going to get the results from this thing that you're thinking. And that has empowered me to improve the tool so much. So I'm hoping that a lot of friendly faces will come to me and say, Clif, I think we can do it better this way. Because I know a lot. As you can see, I know a lot. But I don't know everything. So it is my hope that people who also want to see positive change in the world will come to me and say, love your tool, but let's make it better. That's what I hope.
And I think it's time for another break.
For a break? Yeah. Okay.
Does that look right? I think it's time for another break. But when we come back, I really I want to come back to this idea of, what the world looks like now with something like the human score just getting off the ground and us sort of just realizing that we've got, losses in epidemic proportions. We have a mental health crisis on our hands. We have people feeling overwhelmed by the meaninglessness of work. And so what does it look like down the line when many, many companies start using the happy score and little by little we become more human centric? And even after these improvements that friendly faces come and suggest, what does the world look like then? So I want to give you a chance to think about that vision for when we come back. Yeah.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
They've got such funky music.
I know, it is fun, right?
I have to remind myself the camera's on, stop dancing.
Welcome back, Clif. So talk to me about when millions of people in the world are benefiting from the human score. What does the world look like? What have we gone from what to what?
I just want people to have agency over their lives. Again, if we can maybe take it back to one of the earlier questions you asked me, I have been so fortunate. I've had so many privileges. I mean, I can't even imagine what it would be like not to grow up with the privileges that I had. And I think if we can change work, if we can change the organizational experience, we will be able to empower people to such an extent that we can, now it starts maybe sounding a little bit woo-woo, but really changing people's agency over their own lives, not just feeling like, oh, well, I don't really have a choice. I have to get up and go do this thing now, but actually get up and feel like you're contributing to society, that you're able to create meaning. But there are so many societal structures, and organizations aren't these little microcosms by themselves. They are embedded into societal structures. And so they adopt the limitations and the all of the different various limitations of these societal structures. And so if we want to change this, we cannot do it as individuals. We have to do it as groups, as organizations, as industries, because there's a lot of money in keeping people disempowered. There's a lot of privilege and capital and gains in keeping people disempowered and oppressed. And so hopefully the human score is one out of many tools, because I don't think me by myself or me in the happy spot are going to change the world. I mean, I'm sure we'll make a dent in it.
Let's watch that narrative.
Well, okay, yeah, I don't want to manifest anything negative, but like we'll make a dent in it, a severe dent, hopefully. But hopefully the human score, and working as a member of various corporate doulas, we can empower groups of people to make systemic changes. That's what I want to see, is systemic change, lasting, enduring systemic change.
Yeah, lasting, enduring systemic change. I love that. And I in my getting to know you for this interview, I learned that this isn't just about realigning performance for you, but it's about changing the narrative, changing the culture story. And as you can imagine, that really resonated with me. So tell me, why is storytelling so important in corporate environments?
Because that's how humans communicate. That's how humans um, make sense and connect with each other, is through stories. I learned this amazing tool a couple of years ago that I use in some facilitation work. It's called the Way of Counsel. So it's an indigenous practice of storytelling as a collective. And so I forget the organization's name, who I did my training with. It was, the gentleman's name was Leon. I forgot the lady's name. Anyway, so learning from all ancient indigenous cultures, and using those tools in corporates just again showed me that there's so many different things that we've been divorced from just by the way that we structure work and the way that we work. And if we use things like storytelling, and of course now in 2025, we can use data, we can collect data from people, and we can use that data to tell stories. And there is something else that I wanted to mention now regarding the telling of stories, because I wanted to say that stories can also be manipulated. Stories can be warped, and some voices can be suppressed, and others can be elevated. And so we need to have some kind of tool or approach that tells the stories that help us connect, that help us maintain better mental health. I mean, you mentioned performance just now. One of the things that organizations often talk about when they want to do human-centric stuff, but they're not sure what to do, psychological safety is like one of the big ones, right? We want to have an organization with psychological safety. But I've worked as an executive coach, and I had this one client so he was an executive or just below executive. I'm not entirely sure. A fairly a senior chap. And one of the feedback items that he's had was he needs to create a safe space and psychological safety for his team. And so I knew this because I've worked with this organization with other clients as well. And I said, well, tell me about the performance culture. Like, are you allowed to experiment? What happens when you make mistakes? What's the learning culture? And the bottom line was it's cutthroat. Like, you don't make mistakes. You get penalized for mistakes. We have to push performance. We have to, And I said, then you can't have psychological safety because psychological safety has certain requirements.
Right.
And then to bring it back to the human score, a tool like the human score, obviously I'm biased because it's my tool, but something like the human score is able to flag up things like this. So like, why am I having difficulty establishing something like psychological safety in my organization? Because you have draconian performance management practices. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and it's a great idea to bring out, right? Is that a lot of people talk about, creating a safe space, but you have to be willing to follow through and do it. Oh my gosh. I have so many more questions I would love to ask you, but I know we only have a few minutes left. So I think briefly, if you could tell me, one, how human centricity changes when we work across cultures. Like you just brought in a beautiful example of, bringing in indigenous collective storytelling and that kind of thing. So just if you could in an answer, how does that change? And then please, let us know how we can find you.
Sure. I believe that half of the world's problems would be solved if we were better connected. And by connected, I don't mean via social media. I mean really connecting with people, really seeing how other people experience life. And I think that's I think that I'm a better person now than I was 20 years ago because of the experiences and connections that I've had with other people. So I think it kind of sounds like a cliche, but like experiencing other cultures is really life-changing and world-changing. So I encourage anyone who has maybe the opportunity to do that, to do that. And then I believe that you'd be able to get in touch with the team from the Happy Spot on their website or at the link to sign up that's
Yes,
in this
absolutely. All
description.
those links are in the description. Yes.
If you specifically want to talk to me,
Yeah,
you're welcome to do
Dr. Cliff.
you're welcome to do so. I'm on all the socials. You can just go look for me on Linktree. So you go to Linktree/Clif P. Lewis. So that's Clif with one F, P. Lewis, Lewis. All of my links are on Linktree, or just look for me on not Twitter anymore, because we're not doing Twitter anymore, but Instagram, TikTok, all of the good ones. Clif with one F, P. Lewis.
Awesome.
I look forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the world, and especially at this time where fairness really seems to be at stake. So I'm just so grateful to you for all that you're doing to make work more human and to help really everybody who's working find meaning that sustains them.
Thank you. Thank you. You're too kind. Thank you for giving me a platform and for your thoughtful questions. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone that was listening. I look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you.
Yeah. So I think we have a minute or less than a minute. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to just shout out for people to go do? One thing.
Yeah, just follow me on social media. Go listen to my rants on TikTok, and if they are a bit too racy for you, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I scream less at my phone there. And I cite my sources on LinkedIn. But if you want a good chuckle about, the current state of employment, go look for me on TikTok and Instagram. I've got research coming out all the time. So if you're that way inclined, I post those as well that you can look up. Things like leadership, decision making, human centricity, psychology, burnout.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Talk Radio NYC, Clementina. Really appreciate it. Happy Spot, guys.
Yeah, our friends at the Happy Spot. Thank you.